Well, I have decided to start my garden expansion. I'm not going to be able to finish it until the end of the season, really, because it does require me to rip out some beds that are currently planted, like the green bean bed behind me, which is just now starting to produce, and I don't want to ruin that. But there are a few things I can do in the meantime. I can actually do a lot of things in the meantime. So I am going to document the process here. It's definitely going to be a multi-day, multi-week process because I do work full-time, so this will be done, in my off time, after work, weekends kind of thing. But I'd like to take you along with me, show you what I'm doing. So if you watched my last video, I showed a picture of my plants, and I will put it up here again. But basically, I am going to remove this garden bed, try to salvage the plants, but if I can't, I don't mind because it's not my favorite squash so far. This garden bed is going to be moved here between the fence and the existing bed. Then I'm going to run the garden bed down the fence where the compost is, and then it'll take a turn and run straight out into the yard, which is when I will eventually have to move my green beans, which clearly I don't want to do because they're looking fantastic despite the Japanese beetles. Now at this point you're probably thinking, why didn't she do that before she planted? Well, before I planted, there was a tree there. I planted before the trees even completely leafed out. Well, this year, after I had all my plants in the ground, I noticed that this tree, or tree stump, did not leaf out like the rest of the trees. So when I investigated closer, I realized it was rotten. The tree was dead and needed to come down. You can see a little bit of leftovers from when it was cut down. And I was shocked, honestly, how much sun it brought into this area, which was previously shaded out. I didn't have a garden over this way because it was in full shade almost all day. Well, now that it's not shaded out anymore, I want to take full advantage of all the sunny areas in my backyard because there's not very many of them. And that's why I'm doing it now instead of before I planted. Now, before I can get started on building anything, I'm going to have to move the little bit of landscaping I do have back here. It was shaded out for a long time before I had that tree removed, so the jasmine I have trained kinda sorta along this fence is not that big and should be fairly easy to move, and I do have a few bare spots that I can replant them. The landscape timbers will also have to come up, and the compost bin is going to have to be moved. Thinking about right over there. Still somewhat close to the garden, but out of the way of the expansion. Well, on today's agenda will be to pull up the star jasmine, relocate it, and get this area ready to build in. I had forgotten that I put landscape fabric down before planting that jasmine. I regret landscape fabric. I don't recommend it. It's not worth it. Just put cardboard down if you want to block the weeds, and you can keep adding cardboard every year. But the roots wove into the landscape fabric and I ended up damaging them a lot more than I expected. So hopefully the transplant will take okay. Now, I did have star jasmine all the way down this fence line, but with the freeze that we had in December, a couple of them got killed off, never came back. So I'm just going to use the ones that I pulled up to fill in those holes. And just like that, it's like nothing ever happened. I'm just going to give them a good water in, let them settle, and hopefully they will transplant okay. One thing I'm really excited about is I'm going to put a little seating area under this tree that once that garden bed is removed, I'll be able to access and finally have a shady spot to sit and relax in my garden. Side note, look at all those tomatoes. It's tomato season. Well, that's the first step out of the way. Stay tuned for part 2. See you next time.